What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to YGOPD, your Yu-Gi-Oh! Professional Development, and today I have a very spicy Ghoti Spright list to share with you all. I think I have really cracked the code. Over the past few weeks, I have been working and labbing to figure out something I think is in a really good place to utilize a lot of the unfair mechanics of the Goatee engine while using the consistency of the Sprite and not taking up too many slots in the main deck at that. So what I want to go ahead and do before we hop right in is shout out our new public subs of the channel, ATL, Maddie, SND, and Partygoer. Thank you all so much for joining. If you like what you see and would like to consider joining, please subscribe to the channel so you can get notified along with that notification bell. And do you like the video? It really does help the algorithm and it really does help the channel. So with all that said, we'll go ahead and hop right into the deck profile. Okay, starting with the main deck, we will of course start with none other than the Sprite Engine itself. We are on a pretty significant package. Again, a lot of the power, consistency, and potency is going to come from the Sprite Engine stemming into bridging into the Goatee stuff. So starting off with 3 blue, our Rota for any Sprite monster in the deck. Then following it up with 3 jet, a Rota for any Sprite spell or trap in the deck. And then lastly, we are on 1 red and 1 carrot. You can play pixies if you want as a way to insulate your level 2 tuners from being run over by battle, things like Shift and Zep. You don't have to, but there are some flex spots in here, so feel free if you want to add that. For now, I've not had that really need to come up, and I'll typically, if they're going to try to force themselves into the battle phase, they've already gone through all their resources anyway, and that last synchro push is just going to clean it up from there. For the Sprite spells, we are on triple Sprite starter. Of course, one of the best spells for the deck ever printed, and then one of the Sprite Smashers. You don't need double cross, but if you want a second slot, I would actually recommend a second Smashers here. This helps really well with, again, cards like Zep and Shift, being able to banish them for Smashers, get rid of something on your opponent's board, and then Zep being able to recur itself immediately to Synchro Summon, or Shift coming back on that following standby phase. So that is it for the main Sprite cards. Moving on to the Nimble Package. This is kind of the main star of how these bridge together. We're starting off with 3 Nimble Angler. You really want 3. You want to see this as quickly as possible. We have a ton of ways to discard this in our opening hand, as well as dumping it off of Sprint through the Sprite Engine, as well as the fact that it is a fish, which helps synergize keeping fish names in the grave and in your deck to trigger some of your other stuff. And then the main way we're bridging all of this is with 2 Nimble Sunfish. If you want, you can play, I'm going to give this as an option, but Nimble Sunfish is the highly recommended piece here. You can play a Nimble Beaver or any other Nimble monster that Angler can search, but at the end of the day, you need to pay, sadly, the 20 bucks for at least one of the Nimble Sunfish. That means when you're doing your Angler play and you get these out on the board, you're going to end up leaving 1 Sunfish face up on the field, making that Shift live to banish itself because you have a fish on the board. That's really what makes this whole thing possible. So I would recommend playing at least 2. If you want 3, you can, but at the bare minimum, you do have to get away with playing 1 Sunfish. So I wanted to showcase that here. Again, if you want to have 2 Beaver, 1 Sunfish, you can also do that. But again, you unfortunately do need 1. But if you don't want to shove out for a playset, you can get away with the 1 here. And that's what I'm just going to go ahead and showcase for this build. So that's it for the Nimble Engine. And then, like I had mentioned, we have a ton of ways to discard that Nimble Angler. And so I'm going to go ahead and pop into that first piece here, which is the Adventure Package. Having a Omni Negate to insulate your combo before you even commit is absolutely insane. Using this to discard your Nimble Angler is absolutely incredible, just because Fateful Adventure does say send from your hand to the grave, which would trigger that Angler. So these get you to Fateful Adventure, which allow you to do that. So even if you don't have the Omni Negate set up, it's not a big deal. Same thing with Right. This card says get Fateful Adventure to discard that Angler. And then, of course, we have the sending Angler with Fateful Adventure. And then we also have Foolish Burial as another way. So that's 8 ways right there just to get rid of that Angler by opening it in your hand, let alone sending it off with Sprint. And then, of course, we just play the 1 Draco back and the 1 Griffin. Pretty straightforward there. After that, we are playing a small, you can cut this in favor of more hand traps, but I just really like what this engine does. A small Cybers engine in the form of 2 Cynet Mining and 2 Cybers Gadget. How this works is if you want to dedicate enough slots, Cybers Gadget can be a 1-card gigantic, but in this build it is a 1 card Sprint. The token that Cyber Gadget summons after it gets sent to grave is a level 2. So you can summon this, link it into a Lingaribo or any really link one of your choice that works. Get that level 2 token, get rid of both of those for Sprint, dump Angler, and then make your full combo live there. This is also probably one of the best normal summons you can have to pair with the adventure build that gets your plays online. And then, of course, obviously, Silent Mining is another way that we say send Angler from our hand to our grave to trigger it. Same thing with Cyber Gadget, getting you to Sprint. I would really like to bump the mining up to 3, but for now with space, we are at a clean 40. 2 is perfectly fine, but it's a really, really nice engine. And again, lets you do so much stuff without actually having to commit your sprite bodies to the field. So then you have the freedom to do all that stuff later. Now for the Goatee package, tell me if you've seen this before, but I can build a Goatee deck with 2 main deck monsters. So we're playing 1 Shift and 1 Zep. And that's actually what I found is all you need. I started off with like a pure build, then I went down to like 3 and 2, and then I kept going and I found how you do it with just these. And Nimble Sunfish is really what makes that possible, and I will showcase that in the combo. And I will also say that you are not using these just for sprite stuff. You are using the Goatee package consistently every game, every turn to make the Goatee extra deck monsters. So we are doing Goatee as the primary focus of the build, but we are playing 1 and 1. Shift says the next standby phase after it's banished, it comes back. Zep and then comes back immediately the same turn it's banished, and then you can synchro summon right then and there. So you're typically making either a 6 or an 8 with this, getting the Zep and then synchroing again. These also trigger, if you don't end up synchroing with them and say they go battle phase, run over them, you can still main phase 2, reborn either of these with Elf if you've not used the synchro summon, and then go ahead and still do it in main phase 2. That's something a lot of people don't really pay attention to. And then the last level 2 tech of choice is 1 Hop Ear Squadron. This is searchable through Cupid Pitch. There's obviously runic variants that take a little bit more of a direct focus on Hop Ear. You could cut this for a 3rd Silent Mining should you wish, but I really like the one of Hop Ear. It does a lot. It's very unexpected, and it's an absolutely nuts hand trap in this deck to just synchro whenever you want for really, really insane plays. Just really, I think, good not to have it in here. So that's it for that package. And then the last bit of the deck is just of course, the obligatory additional hand traps that we're playing are the Bestials right now. Still some of the best hand traps in the game, obviously before the release of Kashtira. But we have triple Magnamut and triple Druisworm. This has kind of been my 6 that I've focused on. Obviously, you could replace these with any other hand traps. But again, having extra bodies with your quick synchro is just so important, especially with Druisworm, a card to synchro away. And then your synchro is going to get rid of something. Druisworm is going to get rid of something. You can chain block based on those interruptions. You get so much mileage with it. So those are the 6 that I have been a really big fan of right now. That's it for the main deck. I'm going to showcase the extra deck, and then I will showcase the combo of how we utilize the Goatee engine every game. I'll do it through a live test hand. So we'll go ahead and showcase the extra deck, starting with the links. Access code Talker and Unicorn are pretty standard, bigger links that let you close out the game. Access code speaks for itself. Unicorn mainly pairs with our IP Masquerena. That's our primary IP target. In line with that, we do play the 1 Dark just because, tier is relevant. There's a lot of darks, so is Sprite. There's a lot of Bestials still running around abusing this card to take all that stuff. Get their effects is really, really powerful. For the Sprite links, we are on 2 Elf, pretty straightforward. You usually always go through 1 on your first turn, and then you just want 1 for follow-up. 1 Sprint, obviously in this build, you're not playing a giant Nimble package like the more recent, I think, Joshua Schmidt build. You're just playing the 1, so you really only need to resolve it once. Same thing with Gigantic. You really only need to resolve it once. From there, everything else relies heavily on your Goatees recurring every single turn, as well as your just general Sprite names and the Elf. So 1 Lingaribo for Cyber Gadget. This could be any link one of your choice that lets you use Cyber Gadget. This one obviously works with Imperm if you have other extenders and things like that, so you can get away with using this in a few other uses. So that's it for the main links and exceeds. From here, I'll talk about the synchros. I'm actually going to start low and work my way up for the synchros. So we have 1 Cupid Pitch and 1 Herald of the Arclight. Hero of the Arclight is primarily here for Hop Ear Squadron, since you are locked into fish synchros with the Goatees and you are not with Hop Ear Squadron. But again, this is how you search it, and this is how you make that on your opponent's turn. Being able to do, depending on the game state, either going more Goatee focused or taking a Hop Ear approach and then just going from there is really, really powerful. And then you can just use this on your opponent's chain to make them banish the 8 between Kit and Merly instead of mill the 8, which is really, really good. And then from there, we'll go ahead and showcase the Goatees. I'm actually going to move these out of the way here. So we are on one of the level 6 Arion posts. This does so much. You don't actually need to end on this on your first turn end board. You can usually synchro directly into an 8 and then go into a 10 from there. But if you're really curious in a different position where you want to make sure you have both access to Zep and to the Shift, you can still go the level 6 route first. But what Arion Post does is on summon, it can then banish a fish from your deck. So typically you're using Shift to make this and then banishing Zep to get Zep back and then synchro from there. And then if it's used as synchro material, you can then banish a fish from your grave to then add a fish from your deck to your hand. So essentially you can banish the Shift from your grave that you just used, and then from there go ahead and add another copy of like Nimble Angler or Nimble Sunfish, and then on the crackback on your turn, even if you have 0 sprites in hand, you have a Shift coming back that's a level 2 and an Angler in your hand that's a level 2 you can normal summon, so you still have a guaranteed way to get to Elf at the end of every next turn. From there, we do play for our 8s. We play one of the Oscon and one of the other big level 8 here. This could probably be a white aura whale if you prefer. Right now I want it to be a little bit more true to the Goatee package, so I enjoy this, but white aura whale, there is nothing wrong with having a Raigeki. You just got to be careful with that because white aura whale is a when and can miss timing if your synchro summon is not chain link 1, but it typically, you can make it as that. You don't really have to worry about it. It has to be the last thing happening in the chain so that white aura whale doesn't miss that timing. But typically, you're going to either synchro directly into the 6, and then from there, you can either synchro into the 8 or into the 10, which is Goatee from the Deep Beyond, which is really what makes this deck powerful. Goatee from the Deep Beyond is essentially a board wipe. It's a topologic Zeroboros, where it just wipes the entire board, banishes everything, and then this comes back and boosts itself by 500 for every banished monster. So really powerful engine, really, really unfair with how this deck plays. But yeah, with all that said, that's the main, that's the extra, and I'll go ahead and hop into a live test hand. All right, giving this a thorough shuffle from our deck profile, and then we will go ahead and see what we are working with here for our first hand. We have an Angler, which is fantastic, Starter, Enchantress, right, and Starter. This will be perfectly fine to demonstrate how this works. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start with the Adventure Engine, activate right, getting our token, and then placing a Fateful Adventure to our board. Again, this is one of many ways to either discard the Angler from our hand with a card like either Signet Mining or Away to the Right package, and that can trigger, or you can go ahead and go directly into Sprint. But what I'm going to do is go ahead and just search the monster here. Since we already have a really good discard target, I am fine with just doing that now. Since we want to do that no matter what, we're going to go ahead and add a copy of Griffin, and then we will go ahead and send the Nimble Angler to our graveyard. Nimble Angler is going to trigger, and we will go ahead and if they have no response, chain our Griffin. We will special that. Angler will then trigger, getting us a copy of both our Nimble Sunfish as well as our Nimble Beaver. Again, in a perfect world, you should probably play 2 Sunfish in case you draw 1. You have the second, but again, for this purpose, you can get away with just having the 1 because you could always normal summon it to get a fish on board. So what you can do from here is you can just overlay into Gigantic and then keep playing, but I'm actually going to go ahead and Starter. We're going to go ahead and get Blue, and we're going to trigger Blue's effect, and we're going to go ahead and get Jet. The other option you could do if you wanted to, instead of using Starter, was special summon the Temple to be an extender as well. But from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlay the Beaver and our Blue to go ahead and make a copy of our Gigantic Sprite. From here, what we will go ahead and do is use Gigantic's effect, detach on effect, to then special any level 2 from our deck. So in this case, we are getting a copy of Shift. This is where the bridge happens. So we'll go ahead and get that shift. We can put it right here for now. And then from there, what we can do is link the shift and the gigantic away into a copy of elf. We'll go ahead and do that. And then from there, because we control a fish, meaning why Nimble Sunfish is so important in this build, we can trigger the shift engrave, banish it. I'm just going to put it right here so it stays in that edge of frame to then boost this by 500, and then shift will be able to come back during the next standby phase. From here, I'm going to go ahead and special jet, use jet's effect to go ahead and then add a copy of Smashers from our deck to our hand. So we'll go ahead and add the Smashers. And then from here, that's going to be pretty much it. You want to leave at least one zone open for shift to come back. And I typically like to leave it under the elf so it can't be targeted. If you want to take this one step further, which we most certainly can, is you can link these two into an IP Masquerena. Go ahead, put that there. And then you can go ahead and trigger elf still on your turn before you pass to just bring back a name since you haven't yet. So we'll go ahead and grab Sunfish, and then you can pass. And on your opponent's turn, here's where you really start playing. So shift comes back, and you obviously have these Smashers here to use along with 2 cards for follow-up. I typically will not set the Smashers because if you want, or the starter, because if you want to do the Deep Beyond line, then you're just wasting a card. So you'd rather keep that in your hand. So here's really how you kind of work with things. The first things first, you're going to probably most likely do an Omni Negate for Griffin. So that's one interruption there. We're just going to go ahead and put that there so we know. From there, you have a few different things you can do. You can go ahead, and what I typically will do is use the elf effect here and go ahead and grab anything. I'm going to go ahead and grab a blue and use blue's effect just so we have a little bit of extra follow-up here. I'm going to go ahead and grab a copy of red. You could grab whichever you want right now, but I'm just going to do red just because. And then from here, you have a few more things you could do. You could go ahead and do the IP Masquerena, which depending on what you want to synchro with here, you can leave all these bodies here, or you can get rid of one of them. I'm actually going to go ahead and just use the IP Masquerena and get rid of these 2 here. And I'm just going to go ahead and go right into Unicorn. So this is going to be our second piece of interruption. Unicorn will then trigger, and we can discard, let's say, an Enchantress. So that's our second piece of interaction there. And then from here is where you can go ahead and synchro into one way of your choice. I'm going to go ahead and trigger the shift, and I'm going to actually make a level 6 here using the adventure token. You could just go this way, but I'm going to use the adventure token in this case. So we'll get rid of that, and then we'll get rid of the shift. And then we can special summon a copy of the Arion Post. Now, you can go ahead and use Arion Post's effect to banish a fish from your deck, which in this case is going to be the Zep. I'm going to put that up here. And then Zep's effect will trigger, immediately come back, and then you can go ahead and synchro summon. And you have a few different options. You can do any fish synchro at this point, and you could go either for an 8 by using itself and Arion Post for a copy of the Ascon to banish 1 additional card, or a copy of the Goglim here, whichever one you prefer. Or if you want, you could just go straight into the level 10 by using him as a 6, then the Zep, and then one of your level 2s. If you've not already used the Smasher, which is why we want to keep that here to have that extra level 2 body. So again, that's our third piece of interruption now between Griffin and Smashers and Unicorn. This blue will be banished, and then you can get rid of all of those for a copy of Deep Beyond. Deep Beyond banishes everything on the board, so these will all go, including itself. And obviously, the Arion Post Engrave triggers as in part of the chain to the Deep Beyond. If we had not triggered that yet already, banishing a fish from our grave to then add a fish from our deck to our hand, which in this case is just going to be another Nimble Angler. Go ahead and put that there. And that's the idea. So then coming back to your turn, when you hit your standby phase, you're going to both have a shift come back and a Deep Beyond come back, as well as having a Nimble Angler body, a body that we searched in follow-up in the form of red, and then whatever the blank was in your hand. In this case, it was starter. So you pretty much have unlimited follow-up, which is absolutely nuts. But that's how this works, is you're essentially using Sprint to dump the angler, or any way to dump angler, to get your Nimble Sunfish on the board, making gigantic to get Shift, then Shift because it's in the grave and you have a fish on the board in the form of the Nimble Sunfish. That's what allows you to banish and go ahead and start making all of your plays. So I hope you all like this. I hope it was something unique and different. If you're wanting to exploit and have fun with the Goatee mechanic, but you're not really sure where to start, or if you don't want to do an overly amount of Goatee stuff because it feels clunky and you might want to try something different, I hope this is for you. So thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Later.